Hello, welcome back everybody. It's Katya's Raw Wisdom. Thank you for joining me, and it's a pleasure to have you all here, and a big welcome to all the new subscribers. Wonderful to have your presence here, and look forward to sharing some more riveting interviews with you. And today I'm really happy about this one. I've got Tracy Minton with me. Tracy has a channel, Strong for Women, and Tracy's she's around what, mid-50s?
Yeah. Turned 56.
Yeah, so she's one of the older women who've been through the vegan journey and have extracted quite a bit of wisdom and experience from it, and absolutely want to share what they've got out of it, where they are now, and why they stopped being vegan. So Tracy, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Pleasure to have you here. And
thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So first of all, you were vegan for around 5 years, right?
Yes. Yeah. Most recently, yes.
Okay, so perhaps you can tell us how that was for you initially, what benefits you received, and why you decided to stop being vegan, what was perhaps happening for you health-wise, mentally, emotionally, and then your progression into healing, and also to more of a meat-based kind of diet, and where you're at now. So
okay,
take it away.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. And let's see, I met my now husband in 2010, got married a year later. So it was about a little after we got married, I think in 2012 or so, that we turned vegan. And I had been having some very seriously tender fibrocystic breast tenderness that was off the charts. And how I really started to put this together one day is because my cat likes to crawl all over me when we go to sleep. And one day she happened to be kind of on my breast area, and it made me just about shoot up to the ceiling. It was so tender and painful. And, I understand how our mind works a little bit because of the work I do, and I know how we can kind of go into this self-denial. But there were just different moments in my life where suddenly I would look at myself a little bit more closely and realize, whoa, what's going on here? So when I had that moment of realizing just how tender my breasts were, and I'd been diagnosed with fibrocystic, breast tenderness a long time ago, like college. Well, then I just started to look, and I saw that not only that, but one breast was clearly larger, and they were looking really fatty, large for me. Every woman's dream, right? But for me, I have small breasts, and I'm a small person, and I could definitely see the difference. They were very fatty, and one was definitely bigger. And because my husband's first wife had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she started with that similar condition, and because I took T. Colin Campbell's plant-based certification course later on, where we learned that, it takes a good 10 years for the cancer cells to multiply enough to where it's like just this barely detectable little lump. He and his first wife had been in the paleo movement for at least 10 years. We started to connect the dots. Since she was diagnosed, she was having us kind of help her on her health journey, and she would bring over different videos to watch about the cancer center in Mexico, where they do all the raw juicing and the coffee enemas and all that. They're very well known. They were kicked out of our country, so they're in Mexico. Anyway, so one thing led to another, where we started to add up in our head that the progression of my breast tenderness was from eating more meat and saturated fat. And so while we were watching her go through her process, we finally, just after doing some research, decided to make a change and cut back on the amount of meat we were eating. And then soon after that, we just cut all the animal food out, because the conclusion that we thought was obvious was, well, if a certain amount is bad, then it, even a little must be bad. Why bother? Let's just take it out. And there were some schools of thought that believed, these soy foods And whole grains, because they have these phytonutrients, they can help actually, now some people believe they can lead to a potential cancerous situation, and other people think the opposite. Well, we went into a macrobiotic diet originally because we both had background in that. And within a few months of eating whole grains, beans, tofu, vegetables, sea vegetables, and a little bit of fruit, the breast condition healed. Now, simultaneous to that, Don had prostatitis symptoms, and he has a family history of cancer. His dad has prostate cancer plus skin cancer. His brother's got skin cancer. So we both had a relief of these potentially precancerous symptoms, which was a huge deal, right? That was the big scare, you know? So we continued. And, you know, I think when you first start a vegan diet, your liver, your body does store a certain amount of nutrients. And so you could thrive for a while and feel fine. So then you keep going along, and depending on your age, depending on how much you stored, the crescendo will hit you at different points in time. Some people can go longer, some people shorter. Now I have had a long-standing history of low blood sugar issues that probably, if I ever really had it diagnosed, may have been pre-diabetic. I mean, I had very bad hypoglycemic reactive symptoms between meals. And so in retrospect, would say I'm someone who is just very super sensitive to a high carbohydrate diet and to insulin. But anyway, we went along with the plant-based diet. We thought we were feeling better. We began to really just completely immerse ourselves in every book that all those plant-based doctors wrote, and like I said, I ended up doing T. Colin Campbell's plant-based nutrition certification, met Neil Barnard, met Ripple Esselstyn, because they would come through the Phoenix area and speak, and I would go meet them, and I was like a groupie. I mean, I adored those people, and I would even email back and forth with John McDougall. So, I just was sold, watched Earthlings, all the videos that I thought people don't want to watch because it's too disgusting. And I thought, well, we have to make ourselves watch it because this is what we're doing to these animals. I mean, I went around my home at one point and I collected every last bit of clothing that was shoes, boots, belts, leather, sweaters, seriously, really good quality stuff. And I was so freaking out after a few years vegan, having these things even in my home. And I donated it all. And meanwhile, the animals were long dead. Why it mattered that I had them or not, I don't know. But in retrospect, I can see how my energy might have felt pretty good initially, because often when you make any kind of really serious change in diet, you're going to experience these changes, and they could be positive in the beginning no matter what. But in retrospect, I can see how my mood and my focus and my mental thinking was just on the decline. And I was trying to do video channels, had the Vegan Great Life, had basic macrobiotics, nothing. I was trying to build a website. I wrote 4 books. My first one was Make Every Bite Count, and it was very much a very produce-rich diet. I had tons of smoothies in there, lots of salads, raw dressings, the whole 9 yards. In retrospect, I can see how my mood was really starting to go south, and my ability to have mental clarity, recall, focus, everything over time started to really decline. But in the interim of those 5 years, we were trying every kind of incarnation of a vegan diet. We tried Joel Foreman's less grain, higher bean and greens. We did macrobiotic, which is very grain focused, but also with a lot of beans and greens. Always had at least, a bunch of kale every day, plus sea veggies, all those most nutrient-rich plant foods. So we thought, and then I started to watch some people online. I don't even know how at this point I got caught up in this, but I saw the fruitarian movement, and I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. Never tried all raw, never went all fruit. What the hell, let's try. I jumped into the 30-day banana girl diet in October 2012. And jumped out of that after the month, but continued to be more or less high raw. And, we just kept going back and forth with trying different ways. And why is that? Well, obviously, because there wasn't any one way that was helping us feel our best on an ongoing basis. So I got rid of the main important symptoms that gave me the fear of cancer. And yet I never got rid of hypoglycemia, ongoing constipation. No matter how much fiber I ate like at least 70 or more grams of fiber a day, way more than the RDI. You know, all the green vegetables, beans, all these so-called superfoods or healthy foods, my vision was going. I felt like towards the end of that, I mean, I went through a phase of feeling like I looked almost unnaturally younger than what I was supposed to. And then I started to age. I would wake up, I would see puffiness under my eyes, graying hair, like in front of my eyes, it seemed to be multiplying like crazy, wrinkles, like new ones every day. And I'm trying to film for this channel, and I trashed a whole lot of videos, to be quite honest. And I just thought, well, it's really poor lighting in here, which it is. And it just made all of the worst of the worst look even worse. So I was just kind of starting to go in delusion phase, where I was so sold now on the ideology of being vegan, I couldn't imagine backtracking. But the health was continuing to decline, the moods were declining. And the biggest thing that was so interesting to me was that I just have to use this terminology now. I wouldn't have then, but I just felt so beta. I mean, I just was not feeling like the secure, confident person that I was striving to feel like all alongside the whole vegan diet to overcome.
So Tracy, was that about halfway through that 5 years of being vegan that you felt that
probably, yeah, at least, you know. I mean, because I think the first year we more or less felt okay. It's just that, you know, Don was having serious gut problems. As soon as he starts eating beans and grains, he just got major gas. And I just would end up getting that lower, I call it my lower belly kangaroo pooch. It would all just sit there, you know, and the whole elimination was just irregular. You know, I would have constipation despite all that. And then one day I might drink enough water, flush it out, practically fill enough, you know, of my toilet bowl to like, I mean, unbelievable stools. And then the next couple days it would go back to nothing, maybe a little more, boom, all out. I mean, it was just this constant pattern.
So I'm sure you were soaking the beans and doing all that to supposedly help digestion. Yeah.
Don used to be a live-in macrobiotic chef, so we were all about all of this stuff, seaweeds, everything, and we would soak everything overnight, pressure cook it. We wouldn't eat it if it wasn't pressure cooked. Even the rice was pressure cooked, and it was cooked with seaweed. All these things are supposed to help. Yeah. Anyway, over time, what happened towards the very end is my motivation for life was really starting to lag. I would have all kind of up and down, you know, moments of being happy and fine, but it was just a real battle to continue to feel motivated. I was really struggling in the morning time. I could not get my energy going, and that would be the time we would normally make videos because we'd be cooking and I would try to show what we're eating and doing. We would be training. And it was just like the ongoing amount of energy and time I spent just trying to get back to looking or feeling normal and energized. And by the end of the night, I might feel a little bit normal, but then it would start all over the next day, wake up, puffy eyes, lagging energy, trying to get myself together. I wasn't even drinking coffee or anything this whole time either. But, you know, everything was just on the decline. And then all of a sudden we started to find ourselves buying these pre-made vegan meat substitutes, which are tending to be a lot more savory flavored. And I mean, obviously not anything I would recommend to people, but we were feeling less and less satiation from the food we were eating. It wasn't
at the time you're bloated, so you really can't get more food in, but you're not feeling full.
We would eat these bowls of, I mean, you know, and I'll tell you what happened to me on the raw too, separately. But when we were doing a more grain starch based, we would eat these bowls full of rice and beans and nuts and have it with vegetables for breakfast. And then the next meal would be more greens and vegetables and maybe tofu and maybe a little more rice or a bean chili. And, you know, no matter what camp you were looking at, they all had your right way to do it or your wrong way to do it. So by macrobiotic standards, we were eating too much protein. And, by a lot of the vegan standards, we were eating too much protein. I mean, it was just bizarro world. While we were vegan, while we went on the fruitarian and then the high raw diet, my hypoglycemia got super bad again. And not only that, but my breast tenderness returned. And that was that was like, wow, how did that happen? So I concluded it's those phytonutrients and the whole grains and beans that I must need, because that's what took care of it the first time. So after that, we went back to eating a more macrobiotic diet. But while on the fruitarian, and not only that, but on all aspects of the vegan diet, I was having these episodes way worse while fruitarian and all raw. But I would have that horrible orthostatic kind of hypotensive feeling when I would get up after sitting down, or even just randomly through the day, I would suddenly be like, Don, you have to catch me. Or if he wasn't around, I would have to get on all fours on the floor, and I would feel like the lights would go out. I would have these weird, like, mini seizures. And then a few minutes later, I could come back to normal. That's how bad my hypoglycemic issues were. Not only that,
at that point, were you actually
that was when
that to the diet yet, or that the kind of light hadn't gone on yet?
I realized that the high fruit diet was too high sugar and too low protein. So we switched back to the starch base, where we at least were getting more protein.
Yeah.
I still would have those symptoms, but not as bad as it was. The worst of the worst was when I was fruitarian and all raw. It just got so bad. Our teeth were getting worse and worse every time we went to the dentist. All these things seem to be deteriorating, and the moods, my teeth, hormones. You just don't get saturated. You need cholesterol to produce hormones when you don't.
And darling, were you going through menopause at the time? Had you just started that? Did you feel?
Yeah, when I met Don, I was still having a cycle, and I was always pretty regular. But then once we switched the diet, my periods started to really get irregular, and it could have just been timing, because I was already in my late 40s by then.
Yeah.
We never had a child. I don't know if I was even fertile by that point. I don't know. So
were you kind of thinking some of these symptoms were more related to going through menopause? Again, not the diet, it's so much, but
definitely you're always thinking about everything, because you're wanting to believe that this diet is right. But my menopause symptoms seem to be more hot flashes. I went through a lot of hot flashes. I really wasn't associating the moods with the menopause so much, because I just felt really sluggish and lacking motivation, worse in the morning. So I was looking at things from a yin-yang perspective all the time, because that's our background.
What about sleep, Tracy? Were you sleeping okay? Was that starting to become a problem?
I was not. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I could not go back to sleep. And not only that, but while we were plant-based, and especially while we were all raw, I had horrible allergies and nonstop phlegm, sinus problems. And not only that, but every year at winter, here was the pattern. We have a clinic. So around the winter time, we start to see people when they're sick, and we treat them. And even if Don's the one that's closest to them, if it's just, I would be suspect to picking up whatever cold or flu would be going around. So one or the other of us would get it, and then the other one would. Well, every winter around just past the holiday or over the holiday, I would get pretty sick, and it would last for 2-3 weeks. There were a couple different times. One time, and this was while we were all raw, the sickness that I got was actually like chicken pox or something. I'd had chicken pox as a child, but I had all across the trunk of my body those horribly itchy welts, like meat, like whatever it is. And major chills and fever, I was in tears. It was so bad. I just, wanted to believe, oh, this is just the macrobiotic people. We always want to believe we're having some kind of cleanse, detoxing. It's just detoxing. Well, no, my body was just not functioning well. I wasn't getting my nutrient needs met. So every year after we would get sick, we would barely recover, and then it would be spring allergies, which are horrible here in this area because things are in bloom all year round, and the spring allergies get to both of us the most. So, I mean, the first 3 months of every year or more, I was just miserable. And the phlegm, you know, my whole life, I thought, well, I better stop eating dairy because that leads to too much phlegm or wheat. You know, so here I am. I'm not really eating any of these foods for like 5 years, but still I have horrible sinus congestion.
And here you are
Horrible
thinking you're
allergies.
on what the healthiest diet going that really should be, you know, giving you vibrant health. No, none of these things that are
I
going.
kept waiting.
Allergies.
Yep. And in the macrobiotic teachings too, they basically say in 7 years your body is sort of remade anew. You know, you're developing new cells all the time, and it takes about 7 years to like go through your whole system.
Yes.
So I think part of us kept waiting, you know, still for that magic time period when it would all start to turn around. But
So what was the straws that kind of broke the camel's back for you? What was the real time where you just said, this is
enough is enough? Well, Don really triggered, Don really was the one. He was sitting at work one day eating lunch. And I mean, you know, I took great pride into all the food I cooked. I was writing these cookbooks because I thought Americans need to learn how to cook whole grains, and I'm going to help them. I'm going to make it really simple, you know, whole grains and beans, because these refined grains are so bad for you. What people don't realize is all these studies that say whole grains are good, it's just because they're comparing health consequences to when you're eating refined grains. So yeah, there was an improvement, but it doesn't mean
they still chew up as glue, whether they're refined or not.
There's all kinds of anti-nutrients in there that prevent you from absorbing important minerals like zinc and iron. And so that's what happened. We just started to put everything together in terms of my symptoms. If you went through Chinese medicine terminology, were very blood deficiency, anemic looking, pale, you know, just brittle nails, hair dry, pale everywhere, no energy. And he was feeling less and less satisfied from the food. I could see it in his face. You know, I'm like, part of me is like feeling a little bad. Like I'm making this food taste as good as I can, but he's not looking very happy about it. But in the meantime, he's now, you know, going through his Don kind of way of ruminating. I don't really know what's going on in his mind, but I could see the wheels turning. He had read a book called Neanderthal a long time ago before he went paleo the first time. And it was all about basically, if you had the choice of eating foods that were only provided by nature that you could basically get with a stick, you know, to oversimplify it, what would you eat? These are the foods you should be eating, you know, so it could be fruits. Nuts aren't that easy to extract, you know, they take a lot of work. They're in these super hard shells. They're not available all year, and neither are fruit, and neither are plant foods. Animal foods are available, and, you know, technically speaking, some hunter-gatherer tribes do eat them raw, or at least some of the time. So we just realized, you know, that all these foods are abundant. They've been provided to us by God or the creator, and they're here for us. As harsh as it seems to vegans, I know it sounds bad, but I had a flip switch. He was just thinking to himself, if I had an option of eating any kind of food in the world right now, what would I actually want to eat if I just trusted my own instinct? He's like, a steak.
Right. And because he'd done that, the paleo side, he had that comparison of what having animal foods do on an energetic level to you. So he's probably was starting to think, yeah, that this is not giving me the same
It's not
exchange of energy and health, but yeah.
Not at all. And we hadn't come across Sean Baker yet or anything, but we just started to add. So at that point, we didn't make the decision, like, we're both feeling less and less gratification and satisfaction from the food we're eating. We both have these ongoing major digestive issues, the bloating. We train hard and we're having minimal results. Our moods are going bad. I think his libido was dropping. You know, we both would be quicker to anger, or I would be quick to just be moody. So we just started to add small amounts of animal foods. We might have started with small amounts of leaner meat. And all we did was sub the animal foods in small amounts for the grains and beans. We kept in all the fruit, some nuts, you know, vegetables, in the meat. All the time, we kept always believing you have to eat lots of greens and vegetables. They're, you know, nature's pharmacy. Those are the healthiest foods out there. But, you know, even still, we had instant improvement. instant improvement. I mean, we just started to feel more alive again. Like, oh my God, I'm back. I'm back to being myself. So we just went from there. And then that was about March 2017, just before my birthday. And by May 1st, we started a month-long kind of super low carb, more ketogenic challenge in May 1st, 2017. I have before after pictures, but anyway, yeah, so we started to go lower and lower carb and higher fat, and that was so novel to us. It was like mind-blowing, you know. But we had experiences where we were going to eat all the things I always would have considered the least healthy, right? We're at a farmer's market, and there's this local place that makes the most awesome brisket, and it's pretty fatty stuff, and we'd eat some. And then we happened to go to Trader Joe's after, and they always have those nice little coffee samples out. And I had, you know, like mostly half and half and a little coffee. And by the time I had that brisket and this half and half, I mean, I was like, oh my God, I feel so happy. This is so bizarre. I mean, it was like when you finally see what it feels like to be running on fat instead of glucose, it just is like all your hormones start operating the way they're supposed to. The neurochemistry in the brain starts to get right, and you just feel happy without any need for any reason to. I mean, it was just like an amazing experience. So from there, we just kept kind of going along. And when we stumbled into Sean Baker, we started to go more high protein. But anyway, I can go into that next if you want. But that's the past.
So welcome back to Human-ness, it was.
Absolutely.
Wow. And did you, obviously then things start to improve, anxiety for, you know,
I mean, everything. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. My moods became way more steady, and everything improved. You know, my motivation returned, and I had it just felt like this kind of strange spiritual experience. And again, I know it just sounds so antithetical or counterintuitive to any vegan who's watching. I'm sorry. I understand that. I understand where you're coming from because I was there, but I suddenly felt more in alignment with who I was meant to be. I did not feel that way as a vegan. I felt it was forced if I look back on it. You know, I was trying to make it be, but I can see how it was a bit forced. I finally felt like I was here in the way that I was meant to be here. And part of that is to recognize that it's not all unicorns and rainbows in life. Nature is a non-judgmental force, but we all live under the operating system of the laws of nature. Animals kill for food, right? It's just part of life. It's harsh, but I realized that in my acquiescing to trying to avoid all that, which is really unavoidable, I was becoming less than who I was meant to be. And when you actually think about your ancestors, I mean, they all came through some serious, hardy conditions, you know, and they weren't weak.
That's right.
They did what they had to do to survive. And if you're put in a survival setting, let me tell you, those instincts will come back out, hopefully, or you will not survive.
I think because, you know, for a lot of us, and that would be including you, were brought up as on an omnivore type of diet. I mean, obviously there's a lot more people today who have been brought up vegan, vegetarian, so they have a completely different trajectory. It's how they look at, you know, they can't really compare what they used to feel like when they were eating meat because it hasn't been in their experience, right? So, but when you said you could, it's like you remembered, you know, feeling, that's how it's supposed to feel, you know, whole and not fragmented almost in different areas. That feel that we've come together as a whole person again.
And you know, I want to make a point here. My husband just recently found some research that he posted on Instagram about the fact that millennials by the age of like, I don't know, 30 or so, they're having such higher rates of all of like a whole handful of some of our major diseases right now. And a lot of these people have been people that grew up more vegan. And, you know, they're way more likely to be depressed or go on antidepressants and have all these health conditions. And somehow the vegans keep wanting to blame the meat and the fat for all our health woes, but it's really, if you observe, the trends have been to reduce consumption of red meat for some time. And we've switched our animal fats for these horrible refined plant fats. And so these kids have been coming into life eating these so-called healthier diets, which are actually way more processed, lacking the nutrients they need for balance and, you know, in their mind and health, you know, in their body. And it's showing early on in their life a lot quicker, which I think is good because it's part of following our nature. We have symptoms that give us direct feedback as to whether we're in alignment or not, you know. I don't think people are necessarily putting it 2 and 2 together like they ought to, but
no, and yeah. Well, the great thing about, you know, me and you, we're older, and that's why I love interviewing older women, particularly because we've lived through the time when most of our peers were omnivores, okay, and they ate meat, you know. And now it's a very different story. And with peer groups like Don was saying in millennials, there's probably 1 out of every 4 will be a vegan, or it could even be, you know, statistics are higher. But, you know, when you're hearing stories of girls in their early 20s going through early menopause, these kind of things, you know, I mean, you probably do too, but I have guys that were reaching out to me once they'd heard my stories and they felt they could talk to me. They'd had periods of being fruitarian or mainly vegan through the teenage years, but they'd lost their libido, they've lost their desire to have children even. It just didn't interest them anymore. They were losing strength physically, motivation. We know testosterone is all tied in with those basic elements that make a man, you know, and that's all part of this, how he expresses himself creatively in the world. So this is all happening, and then we've got girls who are, and we just talked on that before, but who basically, I think they have lapses in the maturity process into womanhood. And we're talking about that because I know that vegans that, and I put myself in long term, they've been studying meat. Not only do their facial structure, their body changes to become more, it's maturing into a man, a boy into a man, they call soul boys, and a girl more into a woman. And that's a physical change structurally as well. So I noticed that very much so. But yeah, no, it's an interesting observation because we're going to see a lot more of this. But you know, on the positive side, I think these younger people are going to help the plethora, if you like, of younger vegans now who are jumping on, like 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11, who are going to be falling apart in a few years' time, and they're going to also be able to help these ones. So everything may have its part in the puzzle, but the thing is, it's absolutely shocking to see vegans, these young kids having autoimmune problems like they are, heart problems, fertility, of course, and mental and emotional issues, and that's really disturbing. Like you were saying about antidepressants, it's so common. And even these you know, vegan influencers who are health coaches, and a lot of them are already taking antidepressants. So
are they being transparent about that? I wonder.
Whoa. And so the great thing is that we can actually, you know, help and guide these girls too, and people who are, you know, are in this real fantasy bubble of the ideology of veganism, and are really starting to sacrifice their own health for a concept really that is not going to come to fruition. We're not going to be saving hundreds of millions of animals. It's just not happening now. And these people are falling apart anymore, and some of it can be permanent damage that's going on. Because I've had some come reach out to me, and they're having tests, and there are some nerve damage starting to happen with them. And it's quite frightening. But I love it when some just switch quickly because they awoke, and family and friends have also woken to the damage that's taking place visually. You know, friends that can see it, you know, and they've thought, right, I'm not putting my life before an animal's, and they've switched over, you know.
Right.
But
I mean,
it's harder.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like at this, I mean, I have a very natural gift at seeing more than one side to things. You know, I have a holistic way of looking at things.
Mm.
But yes, it sounds so compassionate and kind to not want to hurt an animal, but it does get kind of twisted, because in their quest to avoid all pain and suffering, they're actually inducing a whole enormous amount of suffering on their own race, on their own kind. And they're not putting it together. They're not seeing it. And, you know, just all of the arguments really fall flat when you look at them anyway. There's plenty of destruction and death no matter what. But yeah, the younger these kids are that start this diet, I think the harder time it will be for them, because they're in their development years, and if they're not getting the essential fatty acids and the cholesterol and the right nutrients, it's going to be really setting them up for some deficiencies long term. But I mean,
You
it's
know,
happening on.
we've both been on that side of the fence, and we know how deep these beliefs run through you and how difficult it is. It can take, you know, almost to people on death's door sometimes before a bell goes off, you know. I mean, bells have been going off, but they actually decide to switch the switch off of the bell.
Right.
The alarm bells are going. Yeah, and people around going, why aren't you, you know, getting the life raft out and jumping on it, you know?
Right.
You're still trying to, you know, stop yourself from drowning, and you're
People
flipping.
get really invested into their belief system and their ideology and their identification with the tribe that's, you know, part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's all these psychological factors. And I really think it's just we're not aligned with nature and natural law, and that is really the big source of what is the problem. And then because of that, we're easily prey for these agendas that are being passed that are actually probably aiming to get people to be less
Well, yeah,
bloated.
because like we said, it's an appealing thing. We all like, because I feel a lot of it has been imposed on us in our cultural conditioning, brainwashing about, you know, Disney cartoons even, you know, about animals and that they have some kind of reasoning, which they really don't. You know, and we've gifted them with these abilities that are very human-like, which they don't have, you know. So in one sense, I'm not saying they're not emotional, but we give them more the ability to think of the consequences and things like that, and that just doesn't happen, you know. If you're in the wild, they're not going to be thinking the consequences of if they're going getting food today and you just happen to be there, and you know, a wild, whatever it is, a boar or whatever decides to run you down and make them meal or whatever it is. But you know what I mean? So it's that, and there's also I guess, you know, we all would love to have that a world that didn't have any kind of, or we see it as suffering or death didn't have to take place. But, you know, as you said, it's not the world we're being born into. It's death and life go hand in hand together. You know, it's been going on for all the time. You can't have life without death, and you can't have death without life. They're all connected. And this is just how it is, and you can just have to go out and spend time in nature, and you see it, it's observable around us anyway. But yeah, that's very much a part of it.
Accept that as that is the natural order of things. It doesn't mean it's easy, but that's part of learning to become a strong spirit. You learn how to just brace yourself and be able to hold within your heart, you know, the immense compassion that you might have for all of life and love for all of life, and at the same time the appropriate boundaries, you know, the appropriate awareness of what is right and what is wrong when you come from that right place to begin with, when you're in alignment, you know.
But, you know, again, too, Tracy, I mean, would you say too that you struggled with the having to absolutely scrutinize the value of fruit and vegetables, where you hadn't, because it's been so indoctrinated through the mainstream, and, you know, even more so in the last decade, we need, you know, 5 different fruits, 5 different vegetables a day, and that's having more quantities suggested.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I was
I think that is the biggest.
Eating vegetables before it was a household. I mean, I was expounding the virtues of kale long before it became this household name. I mean, I would go out to restaurants with friends, and a long time ago, you know, there weren't vegetables on the plate. It wasn't where you can go out these days and find all kinds of restaurants serving up all kinds of healthy food, you know, the whole grains, the beans, the greens. I would eat the parsley garnish from everyone's plate just to get my little bit of green. That's how obsessed I was with getting my green in.
Yeah.
But, you know, so it is an unwinding that goes on over time. I mean, when we started to follow, we came across Amber, who has the blog that Dr. Sean Baker has referenced here and there. She speaks. She's been growing plant foods for quite some time now. And when we started to follow some of these people and go less and less on the plant foods, all the while, I was still having my mental beliefs kind of kick in, like, wait a minute, this isn't right. Aren't you supposed to be eating these foods? But yet, we were having better and better relief at all our symptoms the less we ate of the plant foods. Especially Don, who had psoriasis, who kept trying to eat all these plant foods, thinking that was the antioxidants and all this that he needed to heal his psoriasis. Nothing helped until we went into a place where we were eating a more high protein or fat, basically carnivore diet with very little plant food. That's when he finally started to have a relief of his psoriasis.
So would you say that, vegan food, particularly raw, has its place as a cleansing regime more? So, but not something that doesn't need to get continued. And obviously we've both seen people do improve, and obviously when you first got into veganism to help heal some health problems, and it did, that was a motivation to keep you going. So it does have the ability to, rejuvenate, cleanse, detox, right? And I think that's where the disconnect happens, because we go, well, the plants do have some beneficial value. We've seen it. They do reverse things. But now, of course, we're being exposed and seeing, well, meat can do that too. You can take them out. So, like I said, you're navigating through these beliefs and these, constructs of what a healthy diet really should be. And because it's being delivered more by the mainstream. So, and like you said, it's a step-by-step of actually dismantling some of this, but through your own experience. And like I say, you're being exposed to more and more people who are healing themselves by taking out more and more plants. So, yeah, it definitely...
I have to say that, Don and I came from a macrobiotic and a Chinese medicine perspective. So from our worldview, we experimented with raw, but we never considered it the optimal ideal. And I think it's part of the orthorexia pattern. Raw foods have more enzymes intact, they're more alive, all these things. That's the belief. But, as soon as you digest, as soon as you eat it, you have this soup pot that is ideally at like 100 degrees, this going to completely break down all the food you eat and go into this inferno in your digestive system. And it isn't really that much different than cooking. And not only that, but a lot of plant foods, you're absorbing a whole lot less nutrition when you're eating it raw, which means you need to eat more of it. And if you're a raw person and you're not compensating, then over time, even if you feel initially like it's a very cleansing thing, the reason it's cleansing really is because you're almost going into like a fasting. When you're in fasting or you're not eating enough calories, if you're under eating calories, which if you're on a raw diet, eating what you think is enough, but it's not because you're not absorbing as much, So let's say you have a carrot, and in a raw carrot, you absorb 80% of the beta carotene, and in a cooked carrot, in a raw carrot, you have all of the enzymes and everything intact, and in a cooked one, you have maybe 80%. But in the raw, you only absorb 60%, and in the cooked, you absorb 70%. The net benefit is still with the cooked carrot, in other words, as an example. And
well, I was on a raw diet for quite a long time, and it was okay for me, actually. I did have periods of time where, I did have some eggs because, I just got very anemic. But as far as, energy levels and that kind of thing, and of course now I put that down to, it was more you know, insulin highs and lows, and much of the glucose. And in that stage, but at the same time, it did actually help with a lot of things that I had initially. It did help heal that. So that's what was the impetus to keep going and stay on it. And the thing was, we were told, you know, it was a way to keep, you know, youthful and prevent a lot of the deterioration that happens with aging, you know.
Well, there's still a couple things here. You know, one is, again, what I was saying is when you're under eating food, it's almost like your body starts to go into fasting mode. And when you're in a fasting state, you're actually ketogenic because of the body's, you know, breaking down its own protein. It's breaking down its own fat to keep going, you know, to use as fuel. So in a sense, you're more ketogenic. The dose is the poison, you know, and so whatever you can get away with will be different for each person.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, genetically, what your reserves are. I mean, I've got a couple of really good vegan friends still who've had incredible healing from juicing. And it mind blows when I see the photos of them that were quite sick and they regenerated themselves. And they do stay on predominantly, well, it's vegan, but a high juicing and high oil. But they're starting to get older now and noticing different things, especially when I have conversations with them and how I notice that, you know, memory, cognitive abilities, these are things that become very precious when you get older, and they should be when you're younger as well. But small things that you might overlook and think it's part of aging, but they're not really. So, yeah, I actually
have a lot of experience with this too, because I was feeling my own cognitive decline. It was really difficult for me to have recall, and I would read something and not really retain it. My mom's second husband had dementia, and she's having now some episodes of dementia, and it's kind of breaking my heart. But, you know, we're in a clinic where we see a lot of people. A lot of our clients happen to be women that are about baby boom age, are my age, older. And by and large, no matter what age group we see, whether it's women that are younger that are trying to use acupuncture and herbs for increasing fertility, or it's older people that have a lot of different health issues, joint pain, all these things. Every time we talk to people about diet, they all hands down believe that they should, you know, they eat a clean, healthy diet, and they're eating lots of salads, lots of plant food. Oh no, I don't eat red meat anymore. I don't digest that. Oh no, that constipates me, or whatever. They all, by and large, and especially this older generation that you see walking around all hunched over, and starting to get Alzheimer's. Your risk of getting Alzheimer's or dementia once you're age 80 is pretty high. And so it's because the brain does better when it's uptaking fat for fuel instead of glucose. And older people, you know, you will start to downregulate the amount of hydrochloric acid you produce in your stomach the less animal foods you eat and the older you get. So these older people start to eat less and less of it, and they're eating, by and large, you know, a fairly rich, carbohydrate-rich diet. And so a lot of the degeneration we see that we have all come to accept as normal as we watch these older generations go through their phases. You know, the baby boomer people thought that they were going to be smarter than their parents, and so they started to eat less meat, less animal fat. They don't eat any of those things. They think they're unhealthy. They don't eat pork. They don't eat bacon. They don't eat red meat. But they're not.
Well, you can see how effective the brainwashing is being by the mainstream. I mean, you know, they're really just a product of what's the agenda that's been taking place over the last 20 years, which is demonizing meat, low fat this, low fat that, you know, straight away if anyone goes, you know, reduce your meat consumption. It's acidic. It's, like you said, constipating. It's been shown to cause this cancer, colon cancer, you know, increased heart disease. So all these things we're finding misinformation. There's a wonderful surge of new kids on the block, younger doctors who are really quite bold, and they're really starting to dissect a lot of this information and see that it's got a lot of holes in it and flaws, and they're on the cutting edge of exposing, you know, that it's really not what it's meant to be. And as they go back to our history and see themselves from also changing their diet as well as patients who are thriving on more of a meat-based diet now, that through all these experiences, it's turning what we've all been taught on its head, really. So there's going to be some great inroads, I think, and there's more and more. And especially doctors get on board, you know. The young
people are having so much of a success and a return to health that, you can't take that away. Once you get that, it's so hard won that you're not going to give it up.
Well, and, we can see that out in society. You know, it's the high carb, the high sugar. It's just everyone is either.
People don't realize how addicted to those carbohydrates they are.
The obesity is just off the charts. I mean, it really is. You know, just have to wander around in the cities and see how ill people are.
Oh, yeah. Watch people shop. Watch them in airports. You know, you could see the habits.
All eating fast foods or convenience foods and eating. And this is the thing, you know, because eating back to meat-based, food doesn't have its place. Well, it gets put back in its rightful place. It's not meant to absorb our minds or take up, you know, how many hours of the day thinking about it, shopping, preparing, food ads, this, that, the other. And that's what happens. I'm sure you've experienced that too with the comparison, because comparison.
Oh, I've liberated all kinds of time. I mean, I spent hours cooking all those beans, greens, and grains.
Yeah, but you'd probably notice when you have some high carb foods, you're starting to think about food again a couple hours later. Whereas if you have a high fat, protein, meat-based kind of meal, it satiates you. The thought to refuel yourself doesn't really enter your head for another few hours. Whereas, and I've done this back and forwards as an experiment. It's just really, it's true. You know, as soon as you start eating carbs again, and fruits and whatnot, and you start to switch back onto this glucose run thing. And not only is it like a low level, you think it's energy, it's almost got a little bit of anxiety in the background, because you don't feel as comfortable in your body as you did. That's
because you're not getting your needs met. Yeah. I mean, I used to eat big bowls full of grain with the beans and everything in it. And I mean, I would eat 2 bowls full. I don't know where I would put it all. But within 2.5 hours, I'd be at the clinic with Don going, all right, I need to have a snack now. And he's like,
yes,
where are you putting that food?
Yeah.
You know, but I would be shaky, hungry if I didn't eat again, even though I'm eating way more quantity than I probably need.
Yeah, this is what the companies know. They knew that formula. Just give them more sugar, give them more oils, give them more flours and grains, and that combination is going to make them open all the time to snack foods, and you know, and they'll be triggered all the time by advertising. So
it's just from pure whole grain beans and vegetables. You know, in a couple hours I would be needing more.
Yeah.
You know, as for plant foods have never been entirely excluded from any population, nor have they really been the only part of a human diet. It wouldn't really make sense. And you know, a lot of times plants have been used medicinally. The people around the world have used herbs to either season food or help make something more digestible, to treat diseases, infections, whatever. So herbs and plant foods have their place, but what people don't understand is all this kale and broccoli and all this stuff, there's several things wrong with it. You know, one is they're high in oxalic acids, which are crystals that bind with calcium and lodge into your joints and can cause a lot of pain. They have components that can block the absorption of important nutrients, but also, you know, they're bitter. You know, a plant doesn't, if an animal starts eating at the stalks and leaves of a plant in the wild, it could be a deer, it could be a caterpillar, the plant will actually start to emit chemicals to make it taste more bitter, and it will communicate to all its other fellow brother sister plants in a certain amount of 20 or more mile radius to start emitting this chemical as well. So that suddenly this deer is like, whoa, that's not tasting too good, and it walks clear away from that particular zone. The plant wants to survive just like an animal wants to survive. And so when you think of fruit or flowers, that's the part of the plant it's offering to you, to the bee, to the human, to the insect, because it wants you to partake of its nectar, its beautiful aromas, its succulentness, so that you can eat it and deposit the seed and help it grow, right? So we tend to lean towards fruit as the best plant to add. But especially, anyone who has joint problems or uh, any kind of thyroid imbalance, even if it's not detected by a typical Western medicine blood test, you might want to try getting all these cabbage family foods, all the cruciferous foods out of your diet, because they're containing goitrogens, that are going to block hormone
Well,
production.
I think there's a lot more of an awareness coming on now because, with this green smoothie revolution, or whatever you want to call it, hasn't got into the mainstream, but also the heavy promotion of kale and spinach and all leafy greens. People have been eating quantities that it's really an experiment. We never ate that much.
No,
so
and they're not natural wild foods. These are
people
man-hybridized foods.
Adverse reactions. I know a friend of mine went on a vegan diet for nearly 13 weeks, and she got kidney stones, and the surgeon said it was oxalates from the food she was eating.
Thank
and
goodness
she's quite sick. So, sensitivities are there, that's for sure. So so what? How did you actually then progress to where you are now?
Well, we jumped into this more ketogenic thing May 1st, 2017, and I mean, we were feeling great. My whole body composition changed. I mean, I suddenly was developing lean muscle again, and I don't know in the end, how much weight I ended up losing, but my whole body composition changed so much that the weight difference, after maybe some excess fat came off in the beginning, and it seemed to just melt off, it was just more, I had more muscle, which weighs more than fat, so my body weight didn't end up changing. Well, anyway, then we came across the carnivore people, and we started to eat more and more meat based. And, red meat is king in that crowd. And, some people are so dogmatic in that group that they started to remind me of the vegans, you were eating an onion with that roast. That's not carnivore. It's like, oh, heavens to Betsy. You really like living this way? I mean, come on. Don and I call what we do a hyper-carnivore diet because we suggest people get at least 70% or more of their diet from animal foods and fats, protein and fat. The rest is up to each individual to determine what can they tolerate, how much can they eat based on what they're trying to heal or how they feel, what is local and seasonal, what brings them great satisfaction without taking away from your health. So we started to really ratchet up the protein for a while, and then suddenly realized that was reaching a dead end. And now we've scaled back. So now we're going back to eating more ketogenic, really. It's more 2-to-1 fat to protein. I went from having maybe 100 grams or more of protein a day to now back to half that, maybe 65, with at least twice that of fat. And I like having, especially this time of year, a little bit of fruit with yogurt, maybe a local orange or some berries, whipped cream, I like cucumbers, tomatoes. So I add in low starch vegetables, which are technically botanical fruits, and some fruit as per my craving. I don't eat them if I don't feel like I'm craving them, and I eat them if I want them.
Okay.
And I what you want from that.
Yeah. Did you notice what about the fibrous, the breast? Did that all shift? Did you have hormone?
So no matter how I've been eating since carnivore, I've never had a return of the breast condition at all. Not at all. But I will say eating more fat than protein, what happened is the more I started to add the higher protein, the more those similar symptoms otherwise with respect to low blood sugar were kicking in. So I was noticing it was triggering this hypoglycemia. I wasn't going as long between meals. I wasn't feeling as just balanced and steady, and my sleep got bad again. So what happens is, even if my sleep is interrupted on a pretty regular basis and I've gotten used to it, the part that made it difficult as a high carb or even a high protein is that when I would wake up, it would be like a switch went off in my brain and I could write a book. I mean, my thinking was just like going, and I wasn't wanting to think about something. I wasn't deliberately like ruminating over something that I left unthought of, I mean, it just would like turn on and not turn back off. And when I eat enough fat, that does not happen. Plus our skin feels softer again, and
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Do you find that you're actually able to retain muscle, or the muscle tone, contours And yeah, how's that sort of shifted for you now that when you start eating more meat?
So our recent change to the higher fat again, and then just kind of getting away from the Sean Baker crowd, because I just appreciate all of his contribution, but what I disagree with is that he just basically is almost too casual as a doctor about everything. Like, oh, when people ask him about supplements or should we add bone broth or these or calcium or whatever, he's too blasé about it. The more we study the importance of calcium, there's more that calcium does than anyone's even heard of. It's not even about just building bones, but it has all kinds of other, things that it's supplying to us. And if you're not eating dairy, then you want to make sure you're getting calcium in some form. It's either going to be bone broth, or we make eggshells, or you're going to have to buy a supplement. But, I don't think that we should all just think that we're going to be okay forever if we just eat ribeye steak. I just think that's short-sighted. And
yeah, I can see that it's definitely helped. People with really chronic conditions where they just are unable to have any fiber, plant fiber, or some can't even tolerate, like you say, dairy. So I can see people have just turned out of desperation. Also, maybe also that, but also, depression.
To me, that's the cleansing diet. And there are a lot of people that do really well with there are a lot of people that do, sorry. There are a lot of people that do really well with all raw animal-based diets, and for them, that's great.
Yeah,
not everyone.
You're right. It's elimination. It's a great way to ascertain what foods are actually causing inflammation for you. But inevitably, it's finding your own path. And I've got a background too in plants and herbs, and I think they definitely have their value. And I like them. But at the same time, I'll go some days where I have very little, and it just regulates itself. I'm always very observant of how I feel, and I certainly did go through a period where I felt that my joints and things got worse there for a little bit. When I say worse, because I did have some fibromylgia towards the end of veganism too. That was, it wasn't all from food. There was a very strong emotional component that went into that as well, of trauma that occurred after an accident. So, and my work has always been the emotional and mental side do play a really large part. And in saying that, it's like saying, well, would you put the chicken before the egg, or, the horse before the cart? Is it you have to have nutrition to produce the ability to think and have good feelings, and dopamine levels that are right, and you're feeling pretty okay with the world, or is it the other way around? So but it is something that you need to work through, and there's obviously some truth about this oxalate.
People are having an enormous.
But I think you've got to, when you list the positives, and you could say that your teeth. When you go through all these things that have totally changed, your teeth feel so much more anchored in your mouth. Whereas people were starting to get loose teeth in their gums, as well as all the cavities, bleeding gums.
Yeah, I just had more erosion. Not so much the looseness, but too much tooth decay.
Yeah. So all these things, when you list them down, and like all the improvements you've had, it's just, you wouldn't want to go back to being plant-based. Because,
and I actually had the joint pain as well when I was vegan. I had constant tendonitis, we were training, and I'd always have elbow pain, wrist pain, knee pain. And as soon as we stopped eating all those plant foods, that went away really quickly. I was impressed. Wasn't even expecting that. it just happened. It was all of a sudden like, I don't have all that tendonitis pain anymore. Holy cow.
Well, you look great. You look like you've gone through some changes yourself. And, I know because I had a look at your backstory a little bit when you were starting to get fitter, and you felt that, the veganism had kind of deteriorated you.
Yes.
Yourself a bit, So yeah, that's a good thing. And Don's obviously liking it too. Did you you were both going parallel with when you made these dietary changes yourself? It wasn't kind of just
Yeah, no, there's never, we've always been on the same page together. I mean, one might be a little ahead of the other, but we tend to just kind of go through the whole thing together. You know, he eats what he needs for his needs, and I eat the amount that I need for my needs, but otherwise it's pretty much all the same.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's the one that's always, you know, staying abreast of all the research. So I, you know, get an earful of whatever these latest findings might be. And then we might tweak things. So I think the key is to not be so attached to any one thing that you're doing ideologically, because you got, you know, we like to say biology trumps ideology every time, you know, and you've got to get good at doing what you're doing, observing how you're feeling. If you feel like having some plant foods one day, you have them, and if you don't another day, you don't. And not being so
for sure.
but paying attention to your symptoms. Now some things, you know, you're not going to feel an immediate effect from, you know, like if you just eat one day a plant that's high in oxalates, it might not bother you. But if you start to eat all kinds of almond milk and spinach smoothies and all these things that are all different foods that are rich in oxalates all day long, well, yeah, then after a while, you're going to start to notice a deterioration of health in some manner, whether joint pain or something else.
Well, at least you'll discover some foods that you had no idea you had an allergic reaction to. I mean, one of the biggest things for me was cat hair allergy. I mean, I've got 2 Siamese that I just have had for a few months now, and I hadn't had cats for each one, but I've always had a lifelong cat hair allergy. And when I first had them, I think I'd only just started to eat meat and animal foods. It was around September, I think. October, I got them in November. So I was having a lot of congestion and sneezing and scratchy throat. Yeah, that was just normal. That was to go on quite a lot. But then it was around March, it all just stopped. It was incredible. I don't have any. And they shed a lot, you know, because I'm always brushing them now. It's 41, 42 degrees here. It's just unbearably hot. But that was mind-boggling when that disappeared. And what I found was when I had some almonds, I actually had some almond milk about a week ago, and the next morning I had a clogged up nose and wow, I thought, gosh, this is really different, you know. So
yeah, once you clear those foods out, you're going to feel the effect very quickly.
Yeah, I know, and it's such a shock because, you know, you would never think it'd be almonds or something like macadamia nuts.
Oh, that's another superfood, you know.
No,
all the shelves got cleared out for all the almond milk, and now it's all getting cleared out for oat milk. Now it's oat milk.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's going on for a lot of the population. They've got allergic reactions which they're putting down to something else, whether it be some seasonal climate change or spring pollens or whatever. But it's actually a food they're having every day that they are convinced is a healthy food. The almond milks and well, the nuts. They're definitely
well,
tend to be common for people.
There's a few things your viewers can look up if they're having problems that aren't going away and they're wanting to do their own research. But you can look up oxalate, you know, rich foods and see if you're eating a lot of them. You can look up the FODMAPs, FODMAP, which are the oligosaccharides, and you can look at foods that are high histamine foods if you have allergies. So you might notice that there are foods you've been eating a lot and you have a lot of allergies and you're eating a lot of these high histamine trigger foods. So
this is what I tell my clients, just take them out. And when they take them out, that's when they discover, when they reintroduce them, they're, you know.
That's the best way, you know, that's the best way. There's some moms that have been, you know, that are very anti-milk and they've been feeding their babies almond milk. I mean, I don't know if they ever even breastfed or not. I'm not sure if the study went into that, but it was actually a study of like, I don't know, 9 or so moms that were feeding their babies anything but cow's milk. Yeah. And the babies that were getting almond milk, I mean, they had kidney stones, infants, and rickets, bowed leg. I mean, it's like so sad. These kids are coming into their life with this major problem.
All the traditional, you know, the women that used to give this advice and wisdom, the grandmothers, in the family units, and they've disappeared out of people's lives. And so a lot of people just go on the internet now and just take all this information and just, you know, it's crazy really, because, you know, I can see both sides of the equation, but there's definitely missing this wisdom that was passed on from generations. And, you know, you and I both, I mean, Adrian, I've mentioned this before, when I had my daughter, the maternal clinics used to actually tell us to give them your organ meats and livers. And I know my aunt and my mother would say that she believed for brains and tripe and kidneys and
I think it's
organ meats.
and they would eat the placenta.
Yeah, it was common. And also to put our babies out in the sun, you know, and we were eating sacrifice, all that stuff. So that was what was the advice, and everyone had healthy babies, you know, really rosy-cheeked, you know, babies and plump babies. So
and the earlier generations that grew up on farms, you know, they're the ones that remain living with their brain, you know, functioning, their body functioning through their 90s, even into 100s. Those are the people that are living the longer, healthier lives without going into these modern Western diseases like everyone else.
That's right. So yeah, so it's been a big switch and a big change. That's you certainly won't be going back, you guys. It'll just be a modification, you think, of finding the right ratios for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has to do that. There's no substitute for direct experience. We can all tell people what to do, but in the end, you've got to figure it out yourself. It's going to be the most empowering.
Yes.
No matter what anyone says, everyone has their little bit of differences as to what they tolerate, and it changes over time even. So I do think, you know, that just getting very simple and eliminating a fair amount of the plant foods, at least for a month or a couple months or more, is a good way to go, because then when you put them back in your diet, you will have a better idea of how well you're tolerating those foods.
Yeah, and you know, dairy doesn't suit everybody. You know, again, it's your ancestral background plays a part, but also some people just have those reactions to it. And but for others, they've found that it's just been amazing. They've discovered raw milk, and you know, it's given them immediate power, sense of, you know, really deep nourishment. And I've got a couple of clients who I've got on raw milk, and they're so suited to it. They just feel so immediately, like I said, deeply nourished, like they haven't before, and they feel good on it. So yeah, it is definitely a trial and error, and everyone is different. And I think that's a very important point to get across, that, you know, just looking at what someone is doing and trying to emulate that, it's not going to work. You've really got to, you know, be observant with your own body and what happens when you have this certain food and that certain food, and just, yeah, experiment, you know, to what really works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the best way. And, you know, for any of these movements to be, you know, telling you you're doing the diet wrong because you're not having success, it's kind of like, well, we are, you know, easily going into denial about what we do. I know that is how the mind works, but at the same time, just the dogma that has entered into the whole realm of nutrition is just, it gets a little old and tiring, you know. I don't want anyone, no matter what camp they're in, telling me I'm not this or that because I ate a little of this. I mean, it's just mind-boggling that people want to be
well,
that.
even the name vegan, you know, it's like it's labeling yourself something, and it's not, you know, like I've said before in previous videos, I think it's such a great thing that people travel to different countries, go to different rural villages, look how people live. They'd laugh at you here if you know, you're obsessing about food, and they just eat a lot of Thai meat 3 times a day, and the older people are just robust. I see them working in the fields. They've got a lot more stamina and strength. I see them carrying stuff. I just think that friends, I guess, just over here in these rice paddocks, I watch them and I'm just like, they don't stop. But they just eat their traditional diet, you know, and they do have a lot of plants, and they have a lot of meats as well, and fish. So and that's how it's been. It's when the younger ones, of course, they eat a lot of soda and drink a lot of soda and the sweets. When you start bringing in the sugars and the fried foods, that's when all the health problems start. But if they just kept, that simplicity, no processed foods and no sugar and carb, that's what's really causing all the damage. And I think,
well, the refined plant oils are pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what else would you like to add, my darling? Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I just highly recommend people take matters into their own hand, be proactive, and just experiment, find what works for you. But realize that plant foods do not have certain nutrients and that we need, that are essential for our mental health, our physical health, our hormone balance. So you do want to make sure you're getting adequate amounts of animal foods to supplement those types of vitamins and minerals that you're not getting in the right quantity or bioavailability from just a plant-based diet. And if you have a lot of health issues and you've tried a lot of things, but I guess with most people, the one thing they haven't tried is to actually get rid of a lot of the plant foods for a while and see if that helps. Because it's such a novel idea. Most of us think, how could it be the vegetables, right? But it can be for some. So, you just have to experiment and take things into your own hands. And if you are having extreme challenges that are difficult to resolve, then you'll probably be more motivated to maybe try to eliminate a bunch of foods, go really simple. And after you start to reset yourself and reset your tastes and your cravings, then you can slowly add more in and just try to learn to trust your nature, your true instinctual drive when you're in an alignment to begin with. And, just go from there.
Just a couple of things. Were you taking a swag of supplements when you were vegan as well as the superfood?
We started to take B12 after a while. We were never really taking a lot of supplements, to be honest.
Okay.
We were doing sea vegetables and stuff like that. So no, we were keeping track of our intake on chronometer quite a lot, and a lot of the vitamins and minerals looked fine. But what it looks like on paper is different than what's being absorbed. Yeah. What little did I understand is that even though it looked like I was getting adequate quantities, I wasn't absorbing all of that, and so I was starting to become more and more deficient. But mostly we did start to take some liquid vitamin B12, and I think at one point we took the zinc test. That was another key before we switched back to animal foods. And it's a liquid that you put on your mouth. It's 70% accurate, and if it just tastes like water, then you're likely you're deficient in zinc. So we started to supplement the zinc, but then we started to realize, okay, wait a minute, we're not healing. Our wounds aren't healing. Our allergies aren't going away. There's all these issues. I'm constantly tired. So then we just started to go, if we're needing to supplement this, probably what we really need to do is just start eating animal foods. But now we do take magnesium, and we make our own eggshell calcium. Yeah. And we remember we still do a little seaweed, but I haven't been good at remembering.
So has your allergies, have they all kind of disappeared? Have you got...
We still had allergy symptoms. It's pretty rough here. We've got this old carpet. We've got a cat. There's this dusty as heck. And there's pollen right out our windows and our door during the spring. So it's such an infusion. This is one of the worst states, and it used to be one of the best. So, but it was way improved. Each year since changing, it's been not as bad. So there were maybe a handful of nights where I took a half to a whole Benadryl to sleep through the night, and that was all I needed. Yeah, but otherwise, most everything is certainly a whole lot better. There's things that are still taking time, like vision and everything,
But your cognitive abilities, you think, have just really come up a notch. You've been able to...
Well,
creative abilities, you feel you more...
What happened for me is someone introduced me to these ketones while we were doing the high protein version of this hyper-carnivore diet. And I could not believe the difference in my mind. It was only since taking those ketones that I started to feel like I had my mind back. I could focus. I could go for long hours, just really focused. I was starting to recall things more easily than Dawn, which was a total switch. in retrospect, I realized that the too high protein was kicking me out of ketosis. Through gluconeogenesis and all this, I was starting to have those low blood sugar issues again. So for sure, when I get more fat heavy, then I do fine. And the ketones ended up being a good supplement or a bridge for me. So I guess that is a supplement. And there are some magnesium and potassium and calcium salts in those too. So there's a little supplementation.
Yeah.
And I might take a packet a day. Some days I don't. Some days I take a little more. So, but as long as I stay eating a higher fat diet, I don't tend to need it as much. But they come through in a pinch, make a quick hot drink, and then I'm good to go. If I am in a period where it'll be a long duration between my two main meals, then I supplement with the ketones, and it totally is cool. So those help me a lot.
Yeah.
But they really made a difference when I was eating too high protein, and now I understand why. Because they're good at, even if people aren't wanting to do a really low carb diet, you can experience that feeling of being in ketosis when you take these ketones. And I mean, it's like a switch goes off in your brain. It's like, woohoo, wow, ready to go.
Yeah. I think people have said to me, the people I work with, they've just noticed such a calmness throughout their body that's been missing. And it's a bit of a hard adjustment at first. Like I said, a lot of them been fueled on sugar in a way, through grains and fruits, and it had been producing this kind of low-level anxiety, which they've only just started to make that connect to.
And I would agree with that too. I didn't even say
that. Well, maybe even anxiety, it's this feeling of just being, when I said before, not being comfortable, but it's like not a stable groundness, and the thoughts that aren't coming in aren't intrusive and creating a physical reaction in your body, or they're not crazy thoughts that might be, why would I think that? In fact, you're thinking these things don't actually intrude. They can't get through like they were. That's what someone else has said. But I found that as well, and I found that my creativity really did expand, and other people have reiterated the same thing. And just generally just feel a lot more stable emotionally. And I think the sleep as older women, it becomes so much more
it's critical.
Precious. Yeah, for sure. And like you said, the joint pain, the aches and pains, that's something that's happening more to younger people, particularly if you've had injuries. They can become sites as you get older, where they really produce a lot of inflammation for you and pain, and you don't want to be taking medication. But I found that that's all dissipated as well. And people have actually commented and said, a lot more flow in my speech, but a lot more just not jumping around and scattered.
Feel more right in your body. You're more present and more right in your skin. You're more just here, present, grounded.
And it is different because you can get addicted to the other way of being, and I can see how that's also something vegans, I don't think, subconsciously really cling to. They like it. They like having that, but they're perceiving it as energy, like I said, when it's really this kind of,
it's burning fumes. It's your adrenaline. It's running on adrenaline.
Going up, down, up, down, up, down, feel more sugar, So that's how it is. So what are you kind of eating these days? What's your diet kind of consist of, just so we can
this past
get an idea?
2 weeks is when we switched off the higher protein. So it's only been a few weeks, but we've been having pretty consistently this week for breakfast a little chicken liver, a couple fried eggs and bacon or sausage. And then the next meal, instead of 250 grams of some kind of animal meat, I'm having maybe 50 or 75 grams. And I'll have that either with some sour cream and berries afterwards, or half an orange, or I'll have it with maybe a little cucumber or radish cut up with a bunch of olive oil on it, or even a little walnut oil and olive oil. So sometimes I just personally really like having that oil. Helps me. I can eat less. I can get the lube, the lubing in that I need. As a Vata constitution, I'm a kind of tend towards being dry, and it's a dry environment here, so the oils work for me. I always have at least one kind of fat-charged drink in the day, either ketone with some added cream or coconut oil. And I used to be kind of against the coconut oil trend, and now I've been using it because of the work of Dr. Mary Newport and how beneficial coconut and MCT oil have been towards helping dementia patients. So I've been taking that, up to maybe a tablespoon or more of coconut oil a day and half of that in MCT or something. So I didn't do that to start with. So that's more new, really. I didn't do the MCT oil originally. I never did until recently, actually. So yeah, just, small amounts of animal protein and adequate amounts of fat, and then maybe a little fruit or vegetable. I do sour cream, maybe yogurt. The dairy I do these days is more of the real whole fat, like heavy cream, butter, sour cream, cream cheese, maybe some regular cheese, goat cheese.
Have you noticed the difference in your skin? As far as hydration, the tissues is more hydrated, your skin.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, especially if I get enough fat, though. I mean, even though I was still eating plenty of fat before, when I would eat too much protein, that effect started to kind of fade a little, but nothing like being on the low-fat, high-carb diet.
Yeah,
sure, difference. You got to eat the fat to lubricate yourself. And I was just looking really gaunt and paler, grayish complexion, and it just huge difference, night and day.
Yeah. So for those women who are in those menopausal years, I think it's very important that you get the nutrition. This is the crucial time of your life, as well as puberty, where a woman does really need a lot more. Particularly fats for hormones and for brain and just a nervous system, stabilizing.
Women, especially as they age, we're told you actually do need more protein because you start to lose lean muscle mass as you age.
Right.
And not only that, I mean, if you have aging parents and you see them going through any kind of dementia or anything, that should be a pretty good red flag to start changing your diet now.
Yeah. And for some people they need to take betaine, or fermented stuff. Do you do any fermented foods at all?
Oh, yeah, actually, I mean, that kind of goes in waves. There's times where I'll just make a whole bunch of batches of fermented vegetables, cabbage or maybe red beet and red onion mixed together, and that'll sit in the fridge for a while because I make, big tubs of it. And so then, when we have that ready, we'll have a little of that. If I have a vegetable that I like the most, it would probably be cabbage that I cook really well in a mix of coconut oil and butter.
Yeah, right.
With a little turmeric or curry. But, mostly the only, I mean, once we stopped eating the plant-based diet, I didn't care if I never looked at a bunch of kale or spinach again in my entire life. I mean, I was so like, I can't believe how much I craved those and ate those. I have no desire to eat that stuff anymore.
It's incredible how the desire goes, doesn't it? I mean, I was just thinking before when I asked you about supplements that, I used to wake up when I was vegan and the first thing would go through my mind, okay, I've got to go and mix this, get that tablet down, get them all down from the shelf. Every day this would go on. So B12, colloidal minerals, or shilajit, or chaga, and a range of, some of the medicinal mushrooms, but mainly just, supplements of some kind that I felt I needed, and calcium as well. But algae, the astaxanthin, that was also another thing I used to do for joints, which is actually the algae fish eat, So, well, I eat the fish. But and it cost a lot. But I'd be having that, and then I'd start off with fruit, and then you get to that rev. Well, you think it's not revved up, but energy boost, glucose boost, and off you go. But oh gosh, that's just a change to the morning because that doesn't exist anymore. Taking all these supplements, and I know I've had other ex-vegans say the same thing. That's such a relief when you're not waking up that you got to start the day with this powder, that powder, this powder. It's crazy.
Yeah, we never did do all that. Yeah. I wasn't really a very big fan of all those superfoods and all that.
Yeah.
We're very simple, basic people, and so we never got into that.
Yeah. But again, it's just big money, isn't it, for the mainstream? The vegan superfood business, big business. Well, it's just so good to hear all the changes you've been through. It's really great. So you guys are great. you are a great source of.
It's great that you're doing all these interviews to help.
Yeah.
You know, well, other people who are on the fence, maybe, you know.
Yeah, that's right. And it's great, you know, when you can, you know, go to people who've had the long-term experiences and they can offer, you know, the things that have healed for them and other people as well. There's a commonality. I think once you leave veganism, there's a commonality of the problems that occur for people when they're vegans. And there's a commonality that things that improve or change when you become ex-vegan. So these are great things that you can discuss with other people. And so you guys are great. You're offering a really good resource there for people. So I will put the link down for people who want to go to your channel. And
well, thank you, Katya.
Stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it was great talking to you. So thank you so much. And
great talking to you. Glad we finally got it to work out.
yeah, we finally did. We can run different things chop and change, especially when there's a time difference. I mean, it's nearly 2 a.m. or something for me now. So yeah. So okay. So thanks again. And yeah. So for those who are looking for coaching, as in, I'll leave some links down below too, because I'm obviously doing quite a bit of vegan monitoring at the moment.
That's great.
And, seems to be a lot of it. All right, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Okay.
All right.
Tracy. Okay, bye. Bye.